Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be showing you guys some of my favorite styling techniques to create a modern looking website. Now learning these techniques are not going to take a long time, but using them is going to greatly enhance the look and feel of your website. So let's get started. So in this video I wanted to leave you guys with some cool CSS styling tricks that you can use to elevate the look of your website. And to show you some of these styling tricks, I'll actually show you some of the things that I did on my personal website. First, let's talk about the file structure. All I have are two files, my index.html and my style.css. My style.css is currently empty, and I've made sure to link my style.css in the head of my HTML. So the first styling that I want to talk to you about is the box shadow. So if we go ahead and look at my website, you see that behind my profile image, it looks like there's a shadow behind it. It's as if the image is hovering above the background. And if we scroll down here to my work experience section, you can see that these also have a shadow as well. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to do that. And I'm going to use a div as an example. So let's go ahead and create a div, and let's give it a class. And we'll set that class equal to shadow and save it. Now if we go to our style.css, we can do .shadow. And first, let's make sure that our div has a height and a width. And let's also give it a background color. If we go ahead and save this and refresh our page, we'll see that we now have this aquamarine div that's 200 pixels by 200 pixels. Now if we want to center it on the page, we can just do margin auto. Now in order to add a shadow to this div, we have to use the box shadow styling property. And the way that the box shadow works is you have to specify the horizontal offset, the vertical offset, as well as how much blur you want the shadow to have. And then you can specify the color. So for instance, if we want the horizontal offset to be 3 pixels, the vertical offset to be 3 pixels, and we'll set the blur to 20 pixels. And then for our color, we can do a hexadecimal color, or we can just do one of the built-in HTML colors like gray. Go ahead and save this and refresh our page on the right side. You can see that our div now has a box shadow. If we go into our inspector here, then let's go ahead and take a look at our div. We can actually play around with these fields. And let's say we want the horizontal offset to be 10 instead. As you can see, the shadow got moved all the way to the right side. If I do -10, then you'll see the shadow moves all the way to the left side. Now if I go ahead and change the vertical offset and make this 10, you see the shadow moves down on the box. Whereas if I did -10, you see the shadow moves up on the box. And lastly, with the blur, if we change this 20 to a 10 instead, you can see that the shadow is a lot more precise. However, if I change this to 50, then you can see the shadow around the box is now very undefined. And I could also change the color to anything else that I want. A lot of designers today like to add box shadows to the elements on the website to give it a nice clean and elegant feel. Another thing that they like to do is to soften the edges of their boxes. And the way that they do that is by using a styling property called border radius. So you see how this div has very sharp 90-degree corners. Well, we can use a styling property called border radius in order to soften those corners. So let's go ahead and set the border radius to 16 pixels. Go ahead and save that and refresh our page, and you now see that this box does not have sharp corners anymore, but rather rounded edges. You'll notice that a lot of websites use this pattern, as well as mobile devices for your apps. Now the next thing that I want to show you guys is how you can have elements move when you have your users hover over them. For example, if you go to my website here, you'll see I have these icons which point to my socials. If you go ahead and hover over them, you see that not only do they change color, but they also rise. And we can go ahead and do the same thing for our aquamarine div. So let's go ahead and add a hover styling to our shadow class. In order to do that, we'll do .shadow and then :hover. And now any styling that we put inside here will be applied to the div when we hover over it. Now the styling property that we're going to use is actually called transform. And as you can see, transform has a lot of different options that you can use, but the one that we're going to be using is called translate Y. Inside of translate Y, you get to specify how many pixels you want the div to move. Now Y means that the div is going to move on the Y axis, so up and down. So if we do -2 pixels, and we save that, and we refresh on the right side, when I hover over the div, you can see that that div is moving 2 pixels vertically when I hover over it. Instead, if I made this do 10 pixels, and I save, and I refresh my page, if I hover over the div now, you can see the div moves 10 pixels downward. So if you want the div to move upwards, you'll have to use a negative value inside of translate Y. Now when I hover over this actually looks very choppy. Yes, the div is moving 10 pixels downwards, But what if we want to gradually move? In order to do that, we can use another styling property called transition. And in transition, you use the keyword all, and then you specify the amount of time that you want the transition to take. So in this case, if we want it to take 0.3 seconds, we'll type 0.3s. And now if we save and refresh our page, we'll see that the div now moves downward, taking 0.3 seconds to make that move. And that's how we add that nice little smooth delay. So for this next styling trick, I want to show you how on my personal website I was able to achieve this effect, where when I hover over this image, you see that it fades a little bit. So first let's go back to my index.html and let's add an image tag. First we have to give our image a source attribute. And I've just gone ahead and gotten the URL for the Instagram logo. Now don't forget to give your image an alt. And let's finally give our image a class. Save that and let's go to our style.css and let's give our image a width. Save and refresh our website and you see that we now have this Instagram logo underneath our div. Now if we want to add styling when we hover over that image, we can do .instagram:hover. And now inside of here, we're going to use a styling attribute called opacity. So if we go ahead and set the opacity to 0.5 and save that and refresh our page, now when I hover over this Instagram logo, you'll see that it fades. And we can also use the transition attribute that we learned before in this case as well. So if we go ahead and copy this and apply it also when we hover over the Instagram logo, save our page and refresh, then now you'll see the opacity change also transitions over 0.3 seconds. And it's a lot smoother of a transition. So I hope now you can see there are a lot of really cool effects that you can do with CSS to really enhance your website. These are just a couple of my favorites, and I would encourage you to try to incorporate them in your web design as well. As always, I'm going to leave a link in the description, which takes you to the code that we went over in this video. And I'm also going to link the source code to my personal website so you can go ahead and take a look at all the effects that I used on there as well. Thanks so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.